Milton Walker,
Great. And what is your date of birth?
June 30, 1930.
June 30th and 1930?
30.
Okay. And where were you born?
I was born in Fayetteville, Arkansas.
And now you're coming from Bella Vista, Arkansas?
hmm
I see. So when did you enlist in the Marine Corps?
September 48.
And what brought you to enlist?
Oh, I don't really know. Back at that time, that just seemed like the thing to do. And there were a couple of us, a good buddy of mine and myself, that we enlisted at the same time.
Were you going to high school or something at that time?
We had graduated
Okay.
from high school, yeah.
Wow. You, because I remember some people were saying at that time the Marines were known for having gone through a lot of harsh battles. So had you known, like, you know, there's a Navy, there's a Coast Guard, there's...
Oh, yes. We knew the basic four branches, but there really wasn't anybody from our area that had gone into the Marine Corps, and neither one of us wanted to be drafted into the Army, so we did what we did.
Wow. So how old were you then when you
Then,
when you enlisted?
18.
18 years old.
Just 18, yeah.
Wow. And this was in Arkansas?
That was in Walters, Oklahoma.
Okay. Do you remember when you first heard about Korea and the Korean War? What were you feeling? Did you know about Korea before?
Probably through history. I had heard of Korea, but back then at that age, I wasn't particularly concerned or paying too much attention about national events and so on and so forth. But and of course, I had already been in the Marines before the Korean War took place. Then it sort of became reality when I was told that that's where we would be going.
Yeah. And when you first told your family about that, what did they say?
Nervous. I wasn't married at that time, but told the parents about it. But in my particular situation, I was stationed at Camp Pendleton, and we had a division parade that particular day, and when we got back up to our barracks, the first thing that the first sergeant said to me when I was walking past the office to go take a shower, he said, "Walker, come here. Got something to tell you." I said, "Okay, can it wait till I take my shower?" He said, "No, I think you better come on now." So I did, and he told me at that point that I would be leaving at 0800 the next morning for San Diego to help secure quarters and ship arrangements for the rest of the troops that were coming down.
Oh,
So it was just that quick.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Then again at age 18, you don't have too many worries, and you know the Marine slogan back in those days, join the Marine and see the world. So well, this was the start of seeing part of the world.
But it was gonna be like a difficult experience, difficult way to see the world.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
When did you finally arrive to Korea?
I can't tell you the exact date, but it was the middle of August
I see.
of 1950.
So you came before a lot of people were talking about the Incheon landing in September.
Yes, we were known as the Fire Brigade. We had, I was in artillery, motor transport in artillery, and we left. There were 3 or 4 artillery batteries that made up the fire brigade, and we went as that group, combined group, and our main purpose at that time was to go over to Kobe, Japan, wait for the rest of the division to come in, and then we would go in as a divisional strength. But before we got ready to make a course change to go into Kobe, the ship got word that we were to come straight into Busan. So that we did. And our purpose there was to support and back up the Army troops that were there that came over from Japan, because they were just literally being outnumbered by the North Korean people. And so we were there, known as the Busan perimeter, and we were there then for roughly 30 days until we then came back and boarded ship to go up to Incheon with the rest of the division.
I see. Wow.
And we made the amphibious landing with the rest.
What was your rank at the time?
At that time, I was merely a PFC, but during the Korean War, and the time I was there, I made rank twice again and came back as a sergeant, and then when I was discharged, then about a year and a half later, I was a staff sergeant.
What were some of your, I mean, I'm sure every day was really difficult, but maybe some of the more kind of grueling experience that you can share with me?
I like to think that I had 2 major experiences. One in the Busan area. The time that we were there, I was driving a Jeep at that time, pulling a trailer with comm equipment for the FOs, forward observers. And consequently, being with them, they were up pretty much at the front line. And we were moving up, changing positions, moving up. And we got caught somewhat in a ambush. We fortunately could see it developing, so we stopped the convoy and took the ditch for protection, waiting for our tank crews to come up and give us extra support. We were kind of in front of them, and we probably shouldn't have been. But anyway, my Jeep got a direct hit in the middle of the huge star that was painted on the hood, and of course blew it sky high. Fortunately, none of us were injured in that incident, and when the tanks came up and we also called for air support, we took care of the ambush fairly quick, and we went on, and a day or two later I got me another Jeep and continued doing what I was doing until shortly after the invasion. And I was still driving a Jeep when we went through Seoul and headed on up north at that time. And then I was later brought back to the battery and started driving a truck, pulling one of our 105s.
Wow. So that was one of your two major...
That was one of them. And then going up, of course, after we went up north of Seoul and across the 38th parallel, then we then came back down to Busan, boarded ship, went around on the east coast to Wonsan, and prepared to make an amphibious landing, but we did not have to, so we pulled right into the dock and unloaded everything there, and then we started our trek up the one-way mountain road, which was a very bad decision on intelligence, but anyway, that's what we did, and had no problems, none whatsoever, even though the Chinese were there. They were smart, and they were laying low till we got up to the reservoir, and that's when they then came and completely surrounded us. At that time, I was still driving a truck, but I was pulling a water trailer and hauling galley supplies. When we got up to the bivouac area to unload, unloaded the truck, and then I immediately turned around and started to leave the area to go back down about a quarter of a mile to where a water supply was to fill up the trailer. MP stepped out in front and wanted to know where I was going, and I told him, and he said, well, in case you haven't heard, which I hadn't, that we're completely surrounded and nobody is authorized to leave the area.
Wow.
So that was the start of the 2-week journey back down the mountain.
I see.
And you've seen, I'm sure, some films or have read on it a lot as to the issues, the problems that we had, not only weather, but the numbers. You know, we were outnumbered 10 or 11 to 1, depending on what article you read. But the Chinese had blown up the bridges, particularly the main one down by the water supply area, and other small bridges where you couldn't drive across. They took care of those as well, but in many instances our CBs and engineers did a fantastic job of prepping and getting us where we could go across by cutting down trees, 10, 12-inch diameter, and laying them across, and those you would use to drive across, and they would be over on the other side, motioning which way to turn your wheels and so on and so forth. And we got through there, and then it was just an extremely slow process to get back down the mountain because of what laid ahead of us that we had to go through. And finally, I had to ditch my truck about a mile from headquarters because every tire but one had been shot out. My radiator was just like a screen door, and I had 19 bullet hits in the tailgate of the truck. Fortunately, I didn't, from that, get a scratch.
Wow.
And and I then, we boarded ship along with a lot of the refugees and so on and so forth that followed us out and went back to Busan and then started back up again. And at that point I was driving still a truck and again pulling the 105 and I was relieved and sent back home in the latter part of May of 51. So I was in Korea only 9 months, thereabouts, 8 or 9 months. But I was there in the heat of the summer and there in the worst winter that I guess they've ever had before and since.
Yeah. And the worst part of the winter.
Yes, yes.
Location-wise
the very
too.
worst part of it.
So have you had other wounds? Where you said you didn't get a scratch from that incident, but were you
Okay.
wounded?
Okay. I didn't realize it at the time, and I can't tell you the exact year, but it was probably in 89 or 90. I'd been working for Holly Sugar Corporation, and there was a merger with Holly and another sugar company down in Texas, and I was transferred down there my last 2 years of employment. I had spent 37 years with them, but while I was down there, I noticed that I had a fungus on both toenails, or both big toes. So we went to a podiatrist, and he checked it, and he said, yes, he says you do. He says, there's only one way to take care of that, and that is to remove the toenail. So I had both big toenails then cut off and doctored, and everything in a matter of a couple of weeks. Well, I was pretty well back to normal without a toenail, and they eventually grew back. But then it really wasn't until again the year, it was the 50th anniversary of the Korean War.
So then 2000.
Here in San Diego.
Yeah.
And they had then, which they still do, although they didn't exercise it in this particular reunion, what they call a cold weather seminar I told the wife, I said, you know, I have nothing to lose. I'm going to go and get myself checked out because they had some doctors from the VA hospital here that provided, you know, the checks and so on and so forth. And I had a young lady that examined me, and she had a form that was probably about 4 pages, all pre-printed and all, and she says, now take off your shoes and socks, which I did, and then she started examining my feet and legs, and immediately she said, you've got frostbite symptoms. And she says it is because you've lost all of your hair around your ankles, and that's caused from nerve damage from frostbite. And she said I would highly recommend that when you get back home that you follow a claim and see what you can do. Also, she checked my fingers, and there was evidence there from what she could see and feel that was a problem. So I did comply with her request, and so since that time I've had a total of 80% disability from frostbite, including arthritis in these 2 fingers. So I guess fortunately I did not have the severity as so many of my buddies had in Korea. But in the winter months, still, my toes and my fingers just give me fits. And for no reason at all, I can be like talking with you now, and why my fingers will quiver.
Do you have happy memories from Korea?
I do have. I've said many times that I would do the same thing again under the same circumstances, because it was an experience that you will never forget.
Wow, really?
Yeah. I don't let it bother me too much, although there are times that I get emotional when I speak about it. But, you know, life goes on. And as I say, I'm very fond of the South Korean people. At our church, we had a South Korean music minister, and he was born in Seoul, and came over here at an early age. His parents still live over there, and I had an opportunity to meet his dad, and I golf quite a bit, and his dad was a good golfer, so I golfed with him 3 or 4 times while he was over here, and he couldn't speak English, and my only one word of Korean is, and I may not be saying it right, is kata kata. And but we both understood golf, and we just had a swell time.
Kata kata, would that be like go?
Yeah.
Go?
Yeah.
Did you learn that through him or while you were in the war?
No, over there. Over there.
I see.
In other words, go get out of the way, you know.
Who taught you that?
And pardon?
Who taught you that word?
I don't know that anybody taught per se. I picked it up from, the little kids were curious. And sometimes by being curious, they would get in our way from a safety standpoint. And I can't tell you exactly when I picked it up, but that was one of the words that most of us picked up at, in a fairly early stage.
And you use it so they can, to the kids?
Yes.
So go away.
Go, yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you've had interactions with the local Koreans?
When we could, we were limited some as to what we could do. Again, the Korean people, they didn't ask for what they were getting, and it was a hardship on them. And of course, it made us feel so great and so good as we, in our convoys, would drive past a neighborhood or something, and they would be out there actually with American flag, waving at us. And but as you could probably imagine, we were told, not to get too close because of things that might happen. But we were friendly to them and helped them, the civilians, when we could. And as I say, they would help us when they could, if we were in need or something. And so no complaints from that standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any friends that didn't make it back to the U.S. that you want us to remember?
Of my own friends? Or-
Sure. I don't know if you would remember all their names and everything,
no,
but yeah.
No, but there were 6 of us that were close. And once we split Korea, we left Korea at different stages. That was it. Not necessarily by chance, by choice, but that was it. And I had heard about the Chosen Few being organized when we lived in Colorado Springs, and one of the members in our Sunday school class was telling me about it, and he was Air Force. And he said, Bill, he said, have you heard about the Chosen Few organization? I said, yeah, I've heard of it. He said, well, you should join it. And I said, no, I don't want anything to do with it. I did my 4 years in the Corps. I did my responsibility and my duties, and I'm out of it. I want nothing to do with it. So that was basically the end of the conversation. And a few years later, after retiring from Holly and moved to where we live now in Bella Vista, I received a phone call one evening, and the party on the other end, he said, Milton? Yes. Milton Walker? Yes. Milton Walker from the Marine Corps? Yes. Milton Walker from Oklahoma? Yes. And that was because I enlisted from Oklahoma, and that's where he picked that up. And he said, this is Vern Weiser. And at that time, we just sort of exploded. He was one of the 7. And he says, you don't know how many Milton Walkers in the U.S. that I've contacted.
Oh my.
And I'm so glad and so happy that I finally have run you down. And he then mentioned the Chosen Few. And I said, yes, I'm aware of it, Vern, but no, I don't want any part of it. And he said, well, now, come on. He said, I'm a member of it. Herb John is a member of it. Cecil Corn is a member, and two or three other guys that their names escape me right at the moment. But anyway, all of us were, the 7 guys that buddied together. And he says it's only $25 a month, a year, membership dues. And he said we're having our reunion in Portland this next time, and I think you would enjoy it. So he sent me what he needed to send, and I joined it. And as they say, the old expression, now the rest is history. But at that time, when we all met in Portland, there was never so much hugging and crying from a whole men as there were at that time. And of that group now, there's only 3 of us left. Vern is one of them, and Herb John, Jahn, and myself. And but the sad part about it is that Herb, in his business after he got out of the Corps, he represented a company that called on dairies and milk producers. And for I don't know how many years, once or twice a month, he was in 5 miles of where I lived and didn't know it. And another one of them we call Tiny. You can imagine he's probably 6'6" and weighed 250 or so. And he lived on a ranch only 15 miles from where we lived.
Wow.
And didn't know it. But fortunately, I was able to make contact in person with all of these while they were still alive. And so yes, from your standpoint from the very beginning, we should have had a system set up some way to where we would stay in touch, but we didn't.
So Vern and Herb, are they here?
Vern is not, Herb is.
Oh, okay. Herb is here.
Herb is here.
Oh, I see. Oh.
Herb is here.
Okay.
And
Vern couldn't make it?
Vern, for some reason, after the Portland, he's still a member of the fraternity, but he doesn't attend the reunions for whatever reason.
Okay.
I don't have a clue. The last time I saw him was probably 5 or 6 years ago, and he looked healthy then, so I don't know why. But Herb attends the reunions only when they're on the West Coast. He lives only an hour north of here, is where Herb lives.
Okay.
But anyway, Herb and I, we managed to see each other about every other year. We constantly email back and forth. And so we were thankful for that.
Yeah. I'm just imagining the reunion at Portland when you guys all saw each other finally.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was something.
Wow.
Yeah, the wives just stepped aside and and let us old men, do our thing.
Wow. How did it impact you? What does it mean to you?
It meant to me that people should get along. But as I say, being a Marine, we are well trained. We knew what to do when it needed to be done. And I can say, I guess, and I think I can speak for those that I know well, we were not necessarily afraid. We were concerned, naturally. And, you know, we were all, I had just turned 20. Some of the others were 19, some were 21 or 22. So, you know, just young adults, perhaps not completely matured yet, you know. But we all did what we needed to do. And my daily prayer was, dear Lord, if I'm going to get it, do it good. I don't want to be mangled. So whether that brought me through, I've got to say it had something to do with it.
Yeah.
But several of my buddies did not come back. Others were wounded and had effects, you know, from what I understand, for the rest of their lives. But I'm just thankful that I'm here today. I think that the U.S. did the thing that they should have done at the time. And we didn't necessarily agree with some of the orders and things that were handed down to us to do from Washington, but we did what you know, we were told to do, and did it the best that we could. And as I say, under the circumstances, do it again. I've lived by a lot of things that I learned and picked up from over there.
Sorry to backtrack a little bit, but you said at first you didn't want to join Chosen Few. You served and that was it. You just wanted to just
Right.
leave it at that.
Right.
Can I ask why? What kind of...
Yeah. Because whenever I when my discharge date came up, they tried to get me to re-enlist. I said no. I've done mine. You're too good of an individual, too good of a Marine to lose you. But I said, well, thank you, but I've done my duty, and that's it. Well, you can join the reserves, and you know, go to training once a month and camp once a week or once a year, and all. And I said, no, that's too easy to call me back up if something happens. We'll get in the inactive, and but just get in something to stay connected. And I refused every one of the offers, and I guess I was kind of throwing the Chosen organization in with that I wanted nothing, no connections at all.
Was it because your experience in the war was too difficult? You didn't want to do it?
No, it really wasn't that. I had gotten married after I got back from Korea. Then the young lady I'd been dating for a couple of years, and I just didn't want to raise the kids as with a military family moving around, relocate as you did. And again, I didn't want to take the chance of having to leave my family for another conflict someplace. And had I stayed in Vietnam, here I come.
Right.
Yeah. So no. So it was nothing that the Korean War did or didn't do to my mind to make that decision.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, I'm done with my questions. Is there anything else that you'd like to share? So this video would be just, watched by the younger generations who wants to know more about the war, maybe just want to know more about the Marines. So anything as a Korean War veteran, as a chosen few, as a U.S. Marine veteran, or maybe just as Mr. Milton Walker, anything that you'd want to say?
Well, I think one of the, and this may not be very prevalent with what you're going to document there, but I think one of the things that I see today in young people is lack of respect. It just isn't there. And also the way the world situation is now, everybody's after everybody. You just need to have respect. There needs to be more good family living instead of so many kids growing up without a mother or a father on it. But I think, in my opinion, the respect for others, whether it's respect for seniors, respect for others their same age, it just doesn't matter. It just isn't there. And I know when our kids were growing up in the neighborhood, we knew every person, every neighbor in a block or two on either side of where we lived. The kids all played together. They did their own thing and just had a ball. Today, there's very little outside activity. There's very little creativity on the individual to do things, and very seldom do you know your neighbor 2 doors down. You hardly know the one next door. So what has created that, I'm not sure, but it's not like it was when I was growing up as a kid and when our kids were growing up. But whatever you do, make a choice, do something. And whatever you do, whatever it is that you're going to do, why, make the best of it. Again, so many people, and I realize that jobs today per se are not what they used to be 10 years ago, but any job is better than no job. Do something. My own opinion, I think you'll feel better mentally and physically if you are doing something rather than depending on somebody to hand you something that you're not working for.
I see. Wow, thanks for the advice.
So
Yeah.
I feel very strongly about that.